Thank you all for joining today's roundtable discussion. I'm Sean Kenny, Client Director at Dufrain, and I'll be your host for today's conversation. This is our second roundtable on the topic of motor finance commissions remediation, where previously we talked about what does this actually mean and started to talk about what the affected businesses should start to be doing in preparation for likely redress of customers. So that was a couple months ago, and a lot has happened in that time, which included the attempted intervention by the government, namely Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, but also there's been a statement from the FCA this week on next steps. So it felt like the optimal time to do another roundtable with my colleagues from Dufrain as we discuss what the next 12 months will look like for affected businesses. So I'd just like to introduce the panel. So Mike, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Mike Hairston. I'm Consulting Director at Dufrain, and I have done quite a number of different redress and remediation projects with clients over the years, from PPIs, CCA loan remediation, etc.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. Callum, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, cheers, Sean. So yeah, I'm Callum. I'm a manager here at Dufrain. And yeah, I've got about 6 or 7 years experience working on customer redress remediation projects for a number of our financial services clients.
Also, and Joe, last but not least.
Yeah, so I'm Joe Oxley, senior consultant at Dufrain, and yeah, similarly, I've got probably about 8 years experience now across multiple clients on different remediation projects, including a few that are quite similar to this one where the interest rate's been wrong and we've had to reconstitute the loans based on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So with the developments from the FCA, it's clear that the motor finance industry is facing a significant shift and one that will likely require lenders to take a proactive rather than a reactive approach in terms of how they redress customers. So the goal of today's session is to explore what this means in practice, and there are several key themes that we're going to explore, which are effectively around the challenges faced by lenders. And this is going to be everything from data readiness to operational scalability to regulatory uncertainty, and also, most importantly, what's the impact to customers. This is an opportunity for us to share our insights with the experts that we have on the panel and debate the risks, and also explore what firms should be doing right now for the next 12 to 18 months to prepare for this and navigate this evolving landscape. So to get the conversation started, I'd be keen to kind of go to yourself, Joe, to get your thoughts in terms of what do you take from the FCA's announcement this week?
So yeah, it looks like it's going to be a proactive rather than reactive project now. So it's obviously bad news in terms of the provision, but if I was a data analyst working on this remediation project, I'd probably be a lot happier to do it this way. So if it was reactive, then the starting point is the customer complaint. Then you have to take that complaint, reformat it, dedupe it against other complaints, and then finally match it back to an account, to an actual loan, to figure out whether that customer was affected. But now that it's proactive, you're actually starting with those accounts. So it's a lot easier, a lot further on down the process. So we're probably at a point now where we know like 95% of the population ID requirements. So companies can be getting on with actually getting stuck into that data, extracting it, and finding out where the data gaps are. And data quality becomes a much more important thing now. You're dealing with far more accounts, so you're probably going to have more data quality issues, and those can take months to resolve in some cases. So they'll be wanting to get the ball rolling on that as soon as possible, I think.
Well, thanks for that, Joe. And I think it's interesting, you're talking about from being a data analyst and the more simplistic view of going from a proactive standpoint. But I'm guessing for some lenders, they'll be pretty scared of the idea of having to go back to 2007 to find all the agreement data, all the customer information, etc., etc. Like, Callum, what do you think, or how prepared do you think most lenders will be towards this particular shift?
Well, I think that the whole getting hold of your historical data, digging that out is not really changed from where we were before, because you were going to have to do that anyway to then match it to customer complaints. So I would think that many car finance companies have been doing that, and that work's been ongoing. Actually, I think it'd be interesting to see what next steps the FCA lays out in terms of what happens to those complaints. Because presumably, customers have made complaints. I don't think it's going to go away. I think they're still going to have to respond to those complaints. And what that looks like, I guess we don't know yet, but it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the guidance from the FCA is that post the Court of Appeal cases that are going through at the start of April, it's going to be 6 weeks before they outline what those next steps are. I suppose there's a lot of nervousness in the market, especially in terms of what the likely provision is going to be holistically for all the different companies affected by this. Like, Mike, I'm not sure if you involved necessarily on a project similar to PPI, but I know you've worked on other large-scale remediation programs. What lessons do you think we can take from those particular programs in terms of how we treat this particular issue?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is about being proactive in terms of having a process in terms of identification of historic data and having a process around data quality analysis, data quality remediation as part of the process. The ability to integrate and understand your customer, to be able to link lots of disparate data together. There's all kind of modern data architecture practices that some organizations have made more progress with than others over the last 10 years, say, since the PPI, mis-selling scandals and what have you, where a lot of that work was done manually. So I think that a lot of organizations can be taking these steps forward and can be using this as a mechanism to kind of modernize their approaches to data and good data management in order to support potential future redress and remediation requirements that they might have to meet.
No, I think it's a really good point, and I know from we were obviously speaking to quite a breadth of different clients on this topic, and we still see a lot of clients that still rely upon legacy on-premise systems for projects like this, regulatory remediation. Like, why do you think that is the case, Mike? Why do you think there's a hesitancy to move more towards modern data platforms, modern data architecture?
I think that at the moment there is a clear kind of worry about the time it takes to modernize. Modernization projects as a whole historically are scary, large projects that are notorious for overrunning, notorious for having delays. So if you've got an impending deadline that you're trying to meet, the idea of implementing some modern practices when you might not have them already is quite a daunting process, or daunting thing to have to face. I think that what the counter to that argument is that some of these modern platforms and some of the modern way of managing the data and some of the just the availability and the prevalence of AI, for example, in customer matching and data quality issue identification, resolution, things like that, actually it can help accelerate. So I think yes, there's a risk factor in terms of modernization, but it can certainly, implementing modern platforms can certainly help accelerate certain things. It can also provide greater confidence to the regulator when it comes to things like the lineage of your data, being able to evidence where you've sourced that data from, being able to evidence the accuracy of it, which just with the legacy platforms and kind of how they've grown organically over the years makes it much harder to do. I suppose the only other thing that I'd add is that a lot of these legacy platforms are deeply ingrained in the culture of organizations. And it's not to say that you can't address some of these challenges with the platforms that you have available and what have you. What we're wanting to do at Dufrain is help, learn some of the lessons and implement some, utilize some of the modern ways of working and the modern technologies to address and overcome some of the lessons and some of the challenges from the PPI era.
No, I think it's a really good point, Mike. And I think again with the announcement this week from the FCA, obviously that's quite a significant shift, and I imagine for some lenders that came as a bit of a shock. But I suspect that's not going to be the only shift in, or regulatory uncertainty that's going to come their way over the next 12 to 18 months. Like, what challenges do you think that lenders could face in the next 12 to 18 months in terms of that? Probably come to you, Colin, for that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. I think it's, if you don't know what the end point is, and things have changed, deadlines have changed. There's been announcements, over the last year or so that have come at different times. I think when you don't know what that endpoint is, it's really hard to plan for. So I think lenders need to understand the bits they can control. Some things aren't going to change, whatever the announcements are. And I think it's trying to plan in a way that you can react to change, but also start to move things forward, because we know it's going to be challenging. All redress remediation projects are challenging. So it's about setting yourself up in the best way possible to be successful.
No, 100%. Thanks for that, Callum. So yeah, I think we've kind of talked a bit there in terms of the FCA update and things that lenders need to consider over the next couple of years, I suppose. Just wanted to move on to around data readiness and challenges. I think we've kind of touched upon this already, but I do feel as if it's really important in terms of talking around data gaps. And I kind of alluded to that in terms of going back to 2007 to find out all the commission and customer information for all affected customers. But do we think there are any other bigger data gaps that are faced by lenders in addition to that? I don't know, Joe, you might be in a good position to answer this.
So yeah, one of the big things with it being proactive now is all the customer contact details are going to be completely out of date, aren't they? So you might have a customer from 2007, they might not even be alive anymore. So you're going to have to be engaging with track and trace companies to go off and get those contact details so that you can eventually mail them. And that's a lot harder than it sounds. So you can't just go to them today and say, here we have, I don't know, 500,000 customers, give us all the contact details for those. Because when you come around to actually implementing this remediation project after December, those details are going to be completely out of date. So you need to be able to break them into chunks and do different tranches of track and trace, and make sure that once you've got the details, you're ready to go with the mailing so that they don't go out of date. And then on top of that, sorry, Sean, go.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Well, on top of that, it's just the general data quality issues that you're going to have to deal with. So like Mike said before, you need to have a process that you need to have a full data quality system that is going to allow you to say, well, for each element that we need, what are the expected values for this? What are valid values? What are the values that we've actually got? What's the difference there? What percentage of customers have got valid values across the board, so they're essentially ready to go? What percentage of customers need a bit more investigation? And then how many customers are in that kind of red state of being absolutely miles away, where we're going to either have to go off to external companies to plug the gaps again, or just make some assumptions, make some calculations and proceed on like a best endeavours approach, which obviously is going to need sign off from quite a senior level, and that can take absolutely months to get going with. So that's something that we need to start with today.
I think that to add to that, Joe, like really from a data retention policy regulation perspective, the historic nature of these cases going back to 2007 directly contravenes some of what the business should have been doing from a data retention perspective anyway, legally. So you've just got a conflict with different regulations that are telling you what you need to be able to fulfill historically for this redress, but against, from a data protection perspective, what that retention should look like for that type of data. To overcome that delta is no easy task, and that's kind of why I think the whole point around CMCs might not go away entirely. So there is going to have to, I think, be a process by which a customer will be able to challenge the need for themselves to be, or maybe even provision the data themselves in order for them to be redressed accurately. So that might be joined up on, I don't know, whether it be agreement number, something like that, and this is my details and I had an agreement and you've got that, but you haven't got any personal information about me because from a regulatory standpoint you had to get rid of that information. So just all these complexities, that layers upon layers upon layers of complexity. And Joe, back to your point, that's why you end up creating tranches you create tranches based on different factors around simplicity and availability and what have you that you can process. But yeah, it's mega complex. I think is I think is the way I'm seeing this, even with proactive redress.
I
Yeah,
think
no,
because of the, sorry, sure.
no, go on, Cal. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think because of that and because of the complexities and the size of probably some of the, the customer pools for some of these organizations, the ability to, you know, remediate customers incrementally in an agile way, when you've got all the data, when you're ready to remediate a customer, calculate redress, you do that, you contact them, you pay them, whilst you're also trying to fix, plug gaps in the data elsewhere, or still trying to work out how do we deal with certain customer scenarios. Because yeah, some of these are historic, as Joe mentioned before. Some of the customers may not even be alive anymore. We don't know where they live. There's going to be a number of different work streams, different scenarios that need to be worked through.
No, totally agree. And obviously, the big buzzword and framework at the moment is around AI, and interested to get the collective thoughts in terms of the role AI will play, AI and automation in terms of improving that data retrieval and validation. I don't know if any of you guys got thoughts on that.
I can jump in if you want.
Sure.
The key thing for me is, and regardless of whether this be proactive or reactive redress, whether you're using CMCs or not, or whether you're just looking at historic, you're trying to address the problem of historic data, is data extraction from unstructured data sources, PDFs, emails, statements, written documents held in Iron Mountain in warehouses and what have you. Frankly, that might be a significant part of the program of works that our clients will need to undertake to be able to get the data they need in order to redress accurately. And with the advent of and the maturity of AI and the prevalence of things like OCR, the ability to read images and extract text from images and things like that, that can massively increase the speed at which you can extract this information and the accuracy at which you can extract this information from unstructured documents. So that's one thing that I think clients could leverage, certainly.
I think it's a lot of these organizations aren't going to be in a position where they can leverage AI to its full capability at the moment, but certainly if AI is on your data roadmap as something you want to leverage in future, this is probably a great opportunity to start looking at, what advantages can you get from that and help accelerate, for organizations to help accelerate themselves down that journey. But as you say, Mike, there's certainly some immediate use cases that is easy to see. So yeah, I do certainly think there is a role for AI in car finance remediation.
Yeah, I think the other big one is like data quality. Well, the other couple of big ones: data quality remediation, or identification and kind of recommendations for remediation, things like that, and customer matching, the ability to match and make and decision making around matching of records and keys and things like that, which again, historically is a really, really difficult problem to overcome with legacy platforms and systems, is made easier with the advent of Gen AI and what have you. So yeah, they're three areas I think, but I think you're entirely right, Callum. Like these projects and these kind of regulatory driven projects have the ability to create lasting value and lasting capability in businesses.
Sure, no, really interesting. So I think where I want to take us next is just more focusing around the impact to both businesses and customers on this particular topic. And I suppose one thing that a lot of the lenders that are affected by this will be, there'll be concern around reputational risk. Some of them have quite a big exposure to this particular topic. What do we think in terms of how lenders should manage redress in a way that minimizes that reputational risk? I don't know if I should come to you, Joe, first.
Yeah, so the big thing with that is thinking back to the PPI scandal, the amount of lenders that were fined like absolutely huge amounts for mismanaging claims and delaying claims. And you know, whenever I think about that, I think, what are the processes in the background at those lenders that manage the population? So population management is absolutely key. And with a project, well, with pretty much any remediation project, the core part of the project is a sort of central table, like we call it a master audit table sometimes, which is just kind of the gospel and the current state of every account and every customer that is currently involved in the project and that has ever been involved in the project. So that whenever someone comes to you and says, what about this customer? You can just go to that table and say, well, I can see that this customer came in on this date. Some status changed on X date, and it was sent for remediation on Y date. And so it's absolutely key that that table is updated whenever anything changes. So whenever a new claim comes in, whenever something gets descoped, whenever accounts have to be exception for data quality reasons, and whenever they go to be remediated in the first place, finally. And the other major thing about this this particular project is that everyone already knows about it. So the customers already know that there is a big kind of scandal related to car finance, and that they might have a claim here. So it's not like other projects where the first thing they know about it is when they get a check through the door saying you have been affected and here's the redress. So they're going to be ringing up their lenders saying, what's going on with my claim? Why haven't you refunded it yet? How much am I going to get? So those lenders need to be able to really quickly go to this central table and say, well, I can tell you exactly what the status is. It's either in scope or out of scope, and you can expect redress on whenever particular date. So that central population management part is absolutely crucial to this, and even more so than on your standard remediation project.
There's probably other opportunities around that with that you can get from kind of investing in modern data architecture. Now I'm thinking, giving customers an API that they can access where they can log in, and track their claim that connects to that master audit table. It tells them where they are in the process, and therefore reduces their need to have to ring up, operational teams. And that can, save money for organizations who are running these projects in that way, and also give the customer a better experience, because I'm sure they don't want to be ringing up chasing all the time. If they can just log in and see the status of a complaint or of their case, then that leads to a better experience for them as well.
I think customer experience is massive here. The customer, you go back 15 years to now, what the customer expects, the customer's expectation of their experience around this is vastly greater than it was maybe for PPI or what have you. Like you say, Joe, they also know, the customer knows the customer is going to be proactively chasing in a lot of cases as to what is happening. So your operational overheads could be huge if not if you are looking to do things like you say, Calmer, in terms of a modern approach to providing customers with the ability to track their claim through the process or track their redress through the process, with the ability of operational centers, call centers, and what have you to leverage AI to be able to interrogate systems and what have you to quickly be able to get a summary of a person's status or a claim and what's happening with it. So I think that we've all been part of redress and remediation programs where the cost of the operation and the bottleneck of the operation is the thing that really kind of is the meatiest part of the project, and technology has a big part to play in reducing that overhead and optimizing and making that more efficient, I think.
Okay, cool. So what do you believe are the biggest barriers that are faced by lenders moving their redress remediation processes to modern data platforms? So Cal, if you want to answer that question.
Yeah, so I don't know if the question is, or the answer is whether there's the barriers specifically, maybe more around actually the vision of organizations and maybe not understanding the benefits they can get from modern data architecture. Organizations, you've got a way of working that's worked in the past. Why go through big organizational, transformational change if you don't, if what you've done in the past works? But I think as we've already touched on in this conversation, I think there's new challenges that have maybe not been faced before with this specific redress challenge. I don't know if anyone else got any thoughts.
I think one of the things that we've talked to clients and customers about recently is specifically at looking at modernizing architecture to solve for this problem is doing like a business value assessment, a proof of value on use cases around that for the wider business. So within this one redress non-compliance issue, what are the value drivers that you can pull? What are the benefits that the business can gain within this? So that could be operational efficiencies, it could be accuracy or something like that within this particular compliance problem. Then you've got future remediation activities, like how could you then do the next set of non-compliance issues utilizing the same platform, gaining additional benefits, and then finally looking at the wider business uses and wider business cases for the use of this platform. So things like payments automation, decision automation, processes like this within a business that some organizations made great strides over recent years to modernize and move, but others really have not. So using the platform as a trailblazer in order to demonstrate the value, and then utilizing whether it be what's been built already or using those principles that have been demonstrated as adding value within the project. So I think to your point, Callum, Sean, I don't think it's the barriers technically aren't there. The only other thing that is probably worth considering is maybe skills and culture within an organization. A data-driven culture is something you can talk about easily, but it's not something that's easy to instill. You've got ingrained roles and ways of working around data within organizations, again, that are big transformational pieces to be able to change. So I think it's not just a technology thing, it's as much a people and process thing.
No, I think that's really interesting because I suppose a lot of these organizations probably have the toolkit available to them, and some of them may go through quite a few different smaller redress remediation projects on a regular basis, and it's almost like rinse and repeat of what they've done previously. But actually, it's a real good opportunity, as we discussed, to utilize what they have available, especially considering the scope and scale of this particular remediation issue, and also, more importantly, the customer expectation as well. Because as we've discussed, a lot of remediation projects, customers aren't aware that they're actually impacted until they're contacted. Whereas on this one, we've got hundreds of thousands of people contacting their lenders right now asking, when am I getting my money back? And it kind of nicely leads on to the final section, which is around, I'm keen to understand our collective views around like the industry readiness and future outlook. I suppose one of the risks faced by lenders right now is what, if they're starting to delay their preparation for redress, you'd hope and suspect most businesses are actually proactively in the background trying to get their ducks in a row when it comes from a data perspective. But what do we see are the biggest risks faced by lenders if they delay that preparation, let's say until the FCA outline what their next steps are? Joe, I'll come to you with this one.
I mean, the big obvious one is the amount of lenders that were fined for literally delaying claims during PPI. So, just to kind of throw that one out in front. But I think the biggest thing with a project like this is you'll get to the point now where you've mapped out everything that you want to do. But with pretty much any data-related project, it doesn't always go perfectly according to plan, does it? So there's going to be times where you get data out and you find that there's a major problem with it. You might not have the right people in place, so you might get to the point where you've got requirements, but you don't have people that can actually deliver on those requirements. And there might be technological constraints. There could be all kinds of things that are going to be introducing barriers and introducing delays. So the longer you take to actually get started on the project, the longer it's going to take for you to discover those issues and work to get around them. So you need to get going as soon as possible, I think.
The complexities of all the things we've talked about could not should not be underplayed. I think just in general, and there's not a great deal of time. There is a matter of urgency with regards to being set up in order to do this, and I think if we approach it late, then the cost of the overall redress program will be much greater than having approached it proactively, and whether you started or whether clients have started or not, starting soon in the preparation for this, I think is vital.
Yeah, just what you said about the complexity there, Mike. So I think that the interesting thing about remediation is it's not really like anything else that you're going to do in a bank from a data point of view. It's not like a data engineering project or a BI project. You're going to have to, there are kind of big data engineering-ish elements to do with extracting and managing large amounts of data. But then when you get to the actual redress calculation, suddenly you're doing really precise, really quite complex processes and calculations. And you're going to need your analysts to have quite an in-depth knowledge of the way interest is calculated, when it gets capitalized, how it accrues, the effect that has on arrears and repayment amounts. Is the loan repaying off on track, or is it behind? And those are the kinds of things that you never have to deal with in a data engineering project or a BI project, but suddenly companies are going to be faced with doing this for the first time in a remediation project, and I think it's going to be a big shock. It's just because of how different it is, really.
Yeah, I think if I was an organisation, planning now, waiting to see what the next steps are from the FCA, I think the key thing that I would want to do and want to know, I'd really want to understand my population to as best that I can. Which agreements do I know about? What agreements don't I know about? And of the ones I do know about, what is the profile of that population? And also, and what's the profile of the data that I have available? I said, what gaps do I have? What different scenarios these customers fit in? Do we have customers who have gone into arrears on payments in the past? Do we have vulnerable customers? There's lots of different segments by which you can cut the customers. And I think really getting under the hood and understanding that now will just mean when it comes to actually contacting and dealing and treating customers later, you're going to be in a much better position to react to whatever the FCA decides is the way forward on this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think as we come to conclude this particular roundtable, I think it's important as well. I think we've touched on this at various points throughout this, but the shift to proactive remediation could actually be turned into long-term business advantage, and I think it's really important that we reiterate that point. Mike, you've talked quite a bit about that, especially from an AI perspective, but is there anything else you'd like to call out in terms of what potential long-term business advantage could be spawned from this particular issue?
I think the benefits to the operation around the business and automation of business processes are the two biggest things that I think can be leveraged here. I mean, you could go and talk about so many different use cases for data and AI within these organizations, but I think automation around things like payments and decisioning and the ability for a leaner, more customer focused operation, I think are the two biggest things that can be benefits that can be leveraged from this type of program.
Cool.
I think as well, there's going to have to be a need to build capabilities that a lot of these organizations won't have at the moment. We've touched on things like unstructured data, or you might want to call it, say, dark data, like data that exists in the organization, but few, if anyone, has access to it. Building the capability to access that in future is going to give some of these organizations, a rich set of data that they didn't previously have, that they can potentially utilize for other purposes as well in the future.
Yeah, sure. Any views from yourself, Joe?
Only that the thing with remediation is it's always happening. Like there are always things going wrong. Banks never get it perfect. The regulators always got new kind of announcements coming out. So this isn't going to be the last remediation project that any of these lenders have to deal with. And because it is so high profile, the budgets are going to be big. This is the opportunity to really set in place a best in class, the perfect remediation process so that it can be reused in the future. So it should definitely be built with a view to being able to be adapted for any other remediation process or project that comes up after this, because there definitely will be a few.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Joe, Callum, Mike, for that roundtable. We covered a lot of ground there. And it's clear that the lenders face quite significant challenges. We've touched upon data availability, data quality, reacting promptly to customers, tracing customers. So I think the one thing that stands out that firms right now need to take a proactive approach to be in the best position when the FCA guidance is provided in what's likely to be towards the end of May, early June. But as we, this is our second conversation around motor finance, so this isn't a one-off. So as the situation evolves, we'll keep in track of the regulatory updates and industry trends. And please reach out if you've got anything you'd like to discuss directly with us. But we'll be doing more of these over the next 6 to 12 months as more information comes out. So just like to thank the panel and look forward to talking on this topic in the future.